Hi there, I'm Eric Wordweaver Sjerven, Goalie of the Ridgar folk here in East Texas, and I would like to welcome you to The Raven's Call. This is a show where I ramble on about different heathen-related subjects, just kind of whatever strikes my fancy, sets my mind on fire at the time. Big UPG warning at the beginning of this is every episode. These are just the views of one East Texas heathen. This is how I see the world and how a little snippet of my worldview. And so make of that what you will. These are my observations, and you are very much encouraged to make your own. I am no Asa Pope. I am no, by any means, authority figure on any of this. I'm simply a guy who likes to prattle in front of the camera, and people seem to follow it. So thank you guys. You guys are awesome. That being said, these videos are only ever meant to be like conversation starters for you, or to kick off your own interest in research, things like that. So there you go. Now, housekeeping stuff, all my contacts down below. You guys know how to interact with that. Do with it what you will. If you are interested in anything, email, PO box, all that stuff's down below. Go with that. So, on to today's subject. This is a viewer request that came in very recently, actually. Managed to catch it as I was looking over the Facebook feed. And Robert Runtung popped up a question about the 3 Bs. It's a follow-up on a concept that I have talked about before with regards to kind of a deeper dive into the 3 Bs. And for those that aren't familiar, aren't that are not in the know on the 3 Bs. The 3 Bs are burn, bury, and bog. These are the 3 primary modes of sacrifice as far as what I have been able to suss out and ascertain with regards to sacrifice, in particular to the deities, to the gods and goddesses, but it also applies to sacrifice in general. But in what I've read overall with regards to heathen sacrifice, this seemed to be the 3 main modes of transitioning something across the permeable membrane to the gods and goddesses. Now, the mechanics of what's going on here. We've talked about sacrifice before. We've talked about the mechanics at play in the system of transitioning something from the material plane to the gods and goddesses. There are a number of things that are at play. There's a symbolism, metaphor, and then the actual physical sacrifice. There's intention that goes into this, praxis elements. All of this builds together to form what we know as a ritual. So the ritual that we are looking at right now is blot or feigning. Sacrifice just depends on the terminology that your particular tribe or hearth uses to describe this ritual. The essence of the ritual is that there is a gift that is offered to the divine. We're going to use the divine in this setting, but blot actually transitions as a mechanic to dealings with spiritual entities as well. So when you're dealing with ancestors and when you're dealing with the Vatir, the actual process is very, very similar. It is the offering is made. There's an offering, calling of the entity, offering is made, offering is transitioned across the permeable membrane to said spiritual or holy entity. And then once the offering is accepted, there is a reciprocal gift of luck from the other side, and then that is parsed out to the people. So that's the basic, bloat in a nutshell. Extra trappings beyond that are for aesthetic purposes, for honing in and dialing down your exact feel. As long as those base elements are there, you're effectively hitting the marks for a ritual. But the other aesthetic elements can help you really hone it in and make that ritual more effective. So it's erroneous to really call them just aesthetic or just trappings, although they are trappings and aesthetics. Those particular elements do help to fine-tune a ritual and to make it even more effective, because it affects not only the connection at play, but it also affects your state of mind in the process. So anything that helps to attain that altered state of mind, which is necessary for effectively creating a good ritual contact. Those things are key and good things. So they are more than just aesthetic trappings, but they are aesthetic trappings in the same. Anyway, that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about the 3 Bs here. Now that we've kind of reviewed the basics of what we're talking about with regards to ritual, the 3 Bs are burn it, bog it, and bury it. This is my breakdown for transitioning things from the material plane to the either spiritual plane or divine plane. So we're going to focus on the divine and the gods right now just for simplicity, so that I don't have to break down both of those every time that we talk about it. So when we're talking about making an offering to the gods, you're talking about transitioning something from the material plane to the sacred plane. And you do that by crossing over a permeable membrane. This is a symbolic transition from the overworld to the underworld, or from the material world to the spirit of the plane of the divinity, the sacred plane. There is an actual transition that occurs. And ritualistically, that is achieved by destroying the object, rendering it unusable to mortals. With swords, these would be destroyed ritualistically, usually by being bent over an anvil into an S shape, or broken, or in some way sundered. You are taking the potential of this item and you are sundering that potential, and you are offering the energy of that potential to the divine. You do that by passing it through the permeable membrane, and then that goes to the gods and goddesses. The permeable membranes that we are talking about in this instance are, with burn it, you are talking about a physical barrier of material to immaterial. It is probably one of the most effective means of actually releasing energy from something that is material, because you are literally burning away any essence of what it could be. The fire itself becomes the permeable membrane at that point. When you pass something through fire, there's nothing but the carbon left on this side. So in a lot of instances, things like this, you would pass over things that are like written, anything that's easily burnable. I don't recommend using burning with things like food items. You can in certain instances, like at Livka, when we make our offerings to Idun, one of the things that we'll do are eggs for the fertility side of things during that time of year. A symbol of life and birth, etc., and very symbolic of the springtime. And we will frequently put a few eggs into a fire while we're doing a ritual as part of the offering. Part of the reason for this is because every time I have ever done this, it has been extremely effective when I am doing my little spiel after having made those particular offerings into the fire. The eggs will pop almost as specific accents to things that I'm doing. I have no way of timing it, I have no way of predicting it, but we put them into the coals, and invariably at some key point we'll hear a pop in the background from one of those eggs going, and then the sizzle, and it's just so cool. It's very, very evident at that point in time that the offerings are being accepted and that we are actually doing something with that ritual, something real. Especially when you're dealing with things like writing. If you're going to do something for like Odin, a written word is frequently used. Of course, most people will use like mead or something like that. But with Odin, written word is very appropriate as well, because he is a god of poetry as well as war and magic and all these others. And in that instance, burning a written offering is very effective. You're taking all of that energy that you've put into creating this thing. If you're gonna do a written offering, though, I highly recommend making it the only copy of something that you are sacrificing. Otherwise, you're not really sacrificing it. Sacrificing a copy of a book that you have created, the only thing that you're really going to sacrifice is any monetary value you might have gotten from that. But if you write something specific for Odin, even if you just read it to the group that is gathered in his honor and then sacrifice that piece, then the only moment that this exists is his moment, and it is shared with him, and then it's not reproducible after that. You could go through and try and rewrite it afterwards, but then that would become a new creation that's copying off of something previous, and I wouldn't do that personally, because I feel like it would diminish the value of the offering that was made. So There are other gods and goddesses that fire works for as well. Pretty much all of them in any instance, depending on what it is you're doing. I don't find that necessarily the methodology of sacrifice is better for any particular god or goddess, so much as I feel that the materials that you are sacrificing are kind of key. Now, there are some thematic elements to using fire, such as at midsummer. There are some complications at midsummer, especially if you are in an area that has strong burn bans during that time of year. Making offerings to, let's say, Suna would be difficult to do in fire if you're under a burn ban, so you've got to be kind of creative if you want to try to do that. Contained rings, fire pits, things like that, very effective, especially if you dedicate one to these purposes. If you're going to do a ritual offering, please, please, please exercise good safety with the fire. Make sure that everything is contained, make sure that it is safe, make sure that you don't catch anything else on fire. I also highly recommend that you build the fire and continue to feed it throughout the remainder of your gathering, so that any offerings that are made to it will actually burn all the way through. There are other things that you can do with the ashes once you have completed a burnt offering, such as I have done things where when we would do routine ritual offerings through fire, I would gather ashes from each of my ritual fires and then mix those in with the next ritual fire to kind of create a quasi-eternal flame. It's a continuation of the energies from one into the next. You can also use the ashes in blessings and in wards on property, on belongings, and things like that to help impart some of that luck. It's very similar to sprinkling with the bloattain. You can actually mix the ash in with a bowl of liquid if you've done like a burnt offering, and then you ask the gods to bless like a horn of mead that you then pour into a bloat bowl and use your bloattain. You can actually scoop some of the ashes into that, and that's very effective as well. But again, you've got to be careful, because if you've got an active fire going with cinders and ashes, it's not advisable to ruin your ritual instruments by throwing hot coals into something. So keep that in mind. Timing may be something that is a thing, so you may have to work with that. So we'll see from there. So that's kind of an overview on burning. Let's go ahead and jump into the next section, which is going to be burial. This is another form of ritual that leads to a lot of the discoveries that we have. There are a number of pagan ritual sites throughout Europe where we have found remains of offerings buried outside of or within the bounds of a ritual space. Don't mind the bell, that's a customer leaving. And these ritual spaces will have kind of a dedicated area that functions almost like a mass grave, where offerings are buried. The permeable membrane in this particular modality is going to be the actual surface of the earth. You are literally passing something from the overworld to the underworld, as though burial with like a human being, an inhumation kind of thing. And with that, you are passing from one world into the other and then burying. When it comes to items like this, when it comes to sacrifices dealing with burial, I highly, highly recommend using things that are biodegradable. Food offerings are excellent to do burial with because they will break down into the earth and return very well. Metal offerings can be done this way, but be mindful of the area that you're in. Keep in mind that you don't want to be contaminating any groundwater or anything like that. Most metals will break down over time. I mean, if you're using something that doesn't rust and biodegrade well, then I wouldn't necessarily urge you to do that. Although this is how they will find archaeological evidence of our rituals and things in the future. But if it continues like it does today, then those won't ever get found or recognized for what they are, because they'll just be paved over, bulldozed, or something. It's a sad thing, but it's true. So burial works really well with things that are, again, you can use paper, you can use wooden things that break down really well, food items. Technically speaking, when you are pouring out a liquid offering, you are still crossing the permeable membrane of the soil, of the Earth's crust. That is the point at which it is no longer usable. That is the point when you are passing from this world into the next, because it seeps down into the earth. That being said, I do not recommend doing those kind of things on concrete. Still works, still works, because technically you're not going to be, pouring it from the concrete back into your horn and then drinking it. It will dissipate, it will evaporate, but it doesn't facilitate the permeable membrane nearly as well, because it's not going down into the earth. There's real meat there to the ritual when you're able to do that. So I highly, highly recommend doing it on bare soil when you can. Something that is absorbent and will take it. Pouring over rocks and everything is fine, because like with me, when I'm doing my well offerings, I do pour liquid over my altar, but that goes down into the ground beneath the altar and continues that process. It's also reminiscent of the watering of the roots of Yggdrasil as done by the Norns. So highly recommend being mindful of the environment in which you are working when you do these kind of offerings. More earthy gods and goddesses are definitely better for this particular modality. When you're dealing with things like Freya, this could be a modality that is very effective in reaching them. I find burial more effective for me when dealing with like ancestors or Vetir. I usually will use burial more frequently with Vetir than anything else, simply because I am returning things to the earth and making that offering directly into the soil which they work with. I'm putting it into their world. So that's kind of a thing. It varies and it depends. You can mix all of these as well, burial, burning, and bogging, because you can, like with the ashes from a fire, you can mix that into the soil, you can mix it into water, and then put it into the earth, get all three. All of these are very, very effective. It just depends on how you want to go about it. If you look at The Road to Hell by H.R. Ellis Davidson, you will see some very strong evidence for a period in time where both inhumation and immolation were practiced as burial rites for arch-heathens, because they would burn the body and then they would bury the ashes in an urn or something like that into the ground, and then you have both a combination of inhumation and immolation. So you've got the burn and bury both in the same thing, just kind of working together in that instance. So you can do multiple modalities within a ritual and be very effective. Is it necessary? I'm not going to say that it is. But ultimately speaking, it's going to end up being multiple modalities depending on how you go about it. We'll get to that here in a second. So on from burial, you're going to go into my favorite, which is bog it. I'm a huge fan of bogging. I like the idea of passing through the permeable membrane of the water surface and dropping something down into the bog, the symbolic bog. I use an actual trough that symbolizes our well, and then we'll put our offerings into the well, and then I'll use it throughout the remainder of the ritual. This works really well with things that dissolve well in water. It can also work well with fruits and things like that, food items that are passed through that permeable membrane and then turned to the earth. So it's a combination there of the two, because at the end of the ritual, I will pour out the remainder of the well over my altar and all around my vase space to help spread that blessing once that connection has been made, and we've effectively made heathen holy water. That gets spread around as part of the warding and part of the blessing of the Vey, and spreading that energy in there and really rooting it down and seeding it. So there's a combination of those things. And if you put in things that are biodegradable into your bogging, then those things can return to the earth. I don't recommend using the bog it technique if you are using an artificial bog, quote unquote, like a bucket or I use a big bin, a big galvanized bin. It's a watering trough, and very, very effective, and it's dedicated to this purpose. That is its only purpose. It is our well. And when we do this, and we do all of this, we're going through the symbolism for the mythic parody with the well and the Norns and the watering of the roots of Yggdrasil, with the altar representing the roots of Yggdrasil to send our blessings up to the gods, and then through that into the well to get our blessings from the gods, from the well to the bowl to be spread amongst the people. I do not recommend using things in the well that are going to not really bog well, and then in the same not really break down well afterwards. You know, poppets and things like that, if you wanted to do a symbolic sacrifice, say to Odin, and you want to bog a poppet made from like twigs and things like that, that's fine, because once you bog it and then you turn the water out and return the boggling to the surrounding area, it's going to end up, that poppet will eventually break down. Because it's made of all natural materials. I highly recommend this. When I do poppet work, I usually use sticks and vines and stuff from my surrounding area that will break down well in that area. So that's just kind of a tip and trick there from me on my part, my approach to that. Don't recommend, like, if you're going to sew a poppet, something like that. Bogging, it's not necessarily going to be particularly effective if you are working with a temporary basin. Now, if you are working with an actual large natural body of water, then it's different, because those things will break down over time, especially if you weight them appropriately so that they will sink to the bottom. Those kind of things are different. When you're working with a natural body of water, it's far more effective and so wonderful, but not everybody has that availability. A lot of people, the only way to get to a natural body of water like that is to do it on public land, and then it gets dodgy, because you don't really want to be going out and polluting public lakes with offerings. Not that our offerings are pollution by any means, but other people might see it that way, as not being considerate of the land and things like that. So keep that in mind when you're making your offerings. I mean, if you're going to offer something that is large and obstructive, then it's probably best not to throw that in your local lake, because that could end up damaging someone's boat. Yes, it will eventually rust and break down over time, but in the meantime, it could be quite a hazard to surrounding people. That's not being very considerate, and then that means we're not doing good things in the gods' names. That means in an act of something we did for the gods, we're causing trouble for other people. That does not bring good things to the gods. That's not good Gefrain built. That's not good luck built. So, just saying. I highly recommend things that are biodegradable, dissolvable, and if you're going to use a natural body of water, something appropriately sized, and preferably something that's not going to be damaging to the wildlife in the area. I don't think the gods are going to smile on it too much if you are making an offering that is going to be toxic or in some way dangerous to the local Vatir. Just not really doing good things in their name at that point. So keep that in mind. Keep in mind the why. You want to build a positive relationship with the gods when you do this, and damaging the local Vatir is not going to be a good way to go about doing that. Other than that, similarly, when you're dealing with, like, if you're going to pour out mead, I really like doing mead and liquid offerings into a well, because that melds with the water so well. The symbolism of putting down the layers into the well, seeing how that mixes and all becomes one, and then taking that mixture into the bowl and then using the blow-up tank for it. Oh, it's beautiful. It's excellent. Wonderful. And then that crosses over from the permeable membrane of the water through the ground, and it's just all beautiful in one big thing, and it is gorgeous. I love it. Again, I try not to use anything that might be toxic or dangerous to the surrounding area. Try to keep things towards drinks and whatnot, just simply because it's going to be better for interaction with the environment. I'm not going to put anything in there that's got a high oil content or something that might be toxic or damaging to the environment at that point. Again, just trying to keep in mind that I'm trying to do good things with the names of the gods, not damage. That's just kind of a thing. So that was how I was going to break down the whole multimodal thing, but we kind of already hit that. So the multimodal aspect of this is that you could feasibly burn an offering, put it into your well, and then from the well to the ground, and hit all three modalities in one ritual. Nothing wrong with that. If you want to burn offerings, put them in the well, all of this being part of the same process, and then into the earth after that. It's a fluid movement, beautiful, really good stuff, very strong. But I highly recommend building your ritual around a single modality to begin with. Don't try to get too overly complex with things, because timing becomes an issue. If you try to burn an offering and then bog the ashes, you have to wait for the ashes to either cool or for it to burn so completely that it will effectively bog and not just become this nasty charred mass and not do what you want it to do, essentially is what I'm getting at. Of course, if you use something that's biodegradable or partially wood, then a partially burned thing is still destroyed and passed over. You get the idea. It can be flexible. It's going to build around your particular preferences in these areas and what you value in the elements of ritual as you build. So keep keep these things in mind, build your rituals as you will, and I think you will find things going well for you in the future. As far as particular gods and goddesses that are tied to the bogging process, I find bogging to be effective with all of them, particularly because I work it in conjunction with the symbolism of Yggdrasil and the roots and the Ordswell, Ordebrunner. So I don't necessarily tie a specific god or goddess to this modality, although you could feasibly, if you were doing like a blot and Njord, it would be very appropriate. If you were doing, I mean, bogging rituals have been done for, all of the gods and goddesses over the time. We get evidence of it from Nerthus in the mainland, Odin, all of the gods and goddesses in some way, shape, form, or fashion. We see some elements of each of these offerings at some point in time or another. And so go with what works for you. Go with what fits and what you can work with in your environment. The big thing here is that not everybody has access to an environment where they can do all of these things easily. Someone in an apartment complex might have a difficult time doing a burnt offering, and therefore a liquid offering onto the ground may be more appropriate. Somebody who lives out by the lake may have an easier time doing appropriate boggings and making offerings that help to build the local fish life and plant life, as opposed to doing any kind of damage, because it's more difficult when you have to go to public land to be able to do those things. It all varies. So keep these things in mind as you build your ritual. If you've got more questions, or if you guys want to jump into a conversation on this, jump onto the Facebook group, Wordweaver Productions, and let me know. Jump in there, and whatever works for you, we'll have us a conversation and go from there. Forgive if I seem a little hoarse today. Sinuses with all of the heaters and stuff kicking on. It was like 29 degrees here last night, which I know for you northerners is no big thing, but for Texans, that's cold. I like the cold weather. I enjoy it. I don't like heaters, and everybody clicks their heaters on when it gets down to like 30 degrees. So everybody kicks their heaters on when it gets to like 50 degrees, because Texans typically can't handle the cold. I like it. So I like to keep it cool. That's what I enjoy. Last night was beautiful while I was outside, and then when the heaters kicked on, I get sinusy and it's all this stuff. So, you know how it is. So anyway, thank you all. I appreciate it. Hopefully, Robert, that helped answer some of your questions, or at least gave you the more down and dirty view on the triple B that you were looking for. So keep writing in, guys. I definitely use these recommendations as building blocks for my future videos, and I intend to continue to do that as long as I can. Things are kind of wonky with my life right now, and I'm never sure one day from the next what's going to be going on, and so there may be some interruptions in the schedule. I've done really good about not having any interruptions up to this point. I've been able to stay on point with it. But the YouTube channel does sometimes have to take a back seat to more important hearth and clan elements. And so, depending on how the job front thing works out, I may end up having to take a little hiatus on the channel. I'm going to try not to, but if I do, don't be surprised. I have given you guys plenty of warning, and we'll see where it goes from there. In the meantime, I'm going to go ahead and sign off. Thank you all. Hail to you, and may your hearth fires burn bright. Okay, oof, da. We're gonna see if we can't crack out a video real quick. So, let me see. Background stuff is pretty much the same. Rocking along on stuff. I'm working on trying to help with Dad's business. You guys have seen that, so I'm trying to help build a business so that maybe it can turn into something that I can go to. It'd be great. I did a short commercial for him. I've been doing a lot of marketing, trying to leverage some of what I've done here on the YouTube channel, but over into the marketing side of things. And, not too bad. So if you guys like and want to help support, please jump over there and hit like and follow on Acme. Just help to kind of get it out there so people can see it, and then those that are interested in what we provide will pick it up. If you are. If you're not, no worries. That's not the purpose of this channel. It's not to plug that stuff. It's to talk heathenry. So yes, 2020 has been kind of rough and wild. It has been a difficult time to try and get anything done. A lot of my ETH stuff has been on hold since like March. Since COVID hit, really. And even though things have kind of, I don't know, it's back and forth on stuff, but as far as, when is it okay, when is it not okay to do something, to do the gatherings and stuff, like my park moots and whatnot. And I've just really had to pull back this year, because if you guys have been following the channel, with my work stuff and with everything else, I just haven't had the chance to do a lot of that. I've had some other stuff on my docket lately. And so, I'm hoping in 2021 to be able to do some more of that, and I'm hoping that you guys will be able to as well, because I know that it's a tough deal to try and do, organization stuff and, trying to get park moots and gatherings and things like that together when getting together is the very thing that is most difficult to do these days. Aside from, just the other things that get in the way, like work and family stuff that you're trying to, keep up your obligations to. Some of the more tertiary things, like, big group meetups and everything, have to take a sideline anyway, and then you throw COVID in the mix and everything just gets crazy. So yeah, other than that, I mean, things are doing. So filming time has been a little bit more meh as far as when I can, and when I've got the inspiration and motivation to be able to put these things together. You guys know I've got a lot on my plate, so it's an ongoing thing. So, no new stories on the D&D front. I've toyed with doing some dedicated D&D stuff on the side too. I wouldn't know exactly how to make that work, since I've got this channel dedicated to heathenry stuff. I'd have to set up a secondary channel, because otherwise it'd pop in your feeds for the Raven's Call stuff too, the whole Word Weaver stuff. There would be D&D stuff mixed in with the heathenry stuff, and a number of my subscribers are probably not at all interested in that, so we'll see. Anyway, I guess we'll go ahead and jump into today's subject, since I don't have a whole lot going on in the monologue today. Sorry about that. It's been a busy day. So anyway, we're live in 3, 2, 1. Let's jam. All right, we're going to have to pause this and come back. We have a customer, so this is going to be a two-parter. Yay!